So we finished it today, and that's kind of monumental. But in the last month, there's just been a lot of things slotting into place that are allowing us to kind of go with the direction that we've been nurturing, but haven't been able to finally jump. And I think we're ready to really jump. So the decision to finish the Beam was not about that. It was that we wanted to close every open box because we just left Beam season 3 to go write some stuff to try to be commercial that wasn't commercial. And so now we just want to close all of our boxes so that we have open headspace to write whatever we want. And that left, what we still have left is the Beam season 5 now, and then the last 2 books in the Dream Engine series. And then all of our boxes are closed, all of our series are complete, and we can write whatever we want for the rest of forever.
Bad ass. That is badass. That's gonna be so cool to see. Like, when you're literally kind of like just wrapping season 4 today, and like you're coming back to it after years, like what are the biggest influences, like books that you guys have read over the past few years that have kind of changed your approach? Like, I don't know, because it seems like you guys are very into history, geopolitics. There's like a lot of very global influences and kind of the arc of history and the arc of civilization things going on. Like, are there some new things you guys have read over the past few years that jump out that kind of changed? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, what have you guys read that changed what season 4 is, or if you had gone right into season 4, that it's now a different season 4?
I'm curious what Sean would say, but for me, the answer is nothing. I don't feel like I'm influenced. I think I will be influenced in mood. So we used to do this thing, and I think we'll get back to it, where usually Sean would give me a movie to watch, even if it was just for the tone and mood. And there are things. So Unicorn Western, as an example, there are 9 little books in that series, and each one uses as its framework, I suppose, or inspiration, a classic Western. So like the first one is High Noon, the second one is The Searchers, the third one is Fistful of Dollars, and so on. And like, we're not trying to hide it. Like, there's a chapter by the name of the Westerns based on in that book. Right. I like to really put my references on my sleeve, like including just stupid ones. I'm big on 90s references for some reason.
He really has a RoboCop fetish. Like,
and I don't. It just ends up being like funny sometimes to like
RoboCop
writing the
is
robot
38% of our books.
Well, I mean, it just gives me such delight to be able to, like, if something epic is going to happen at the end of an inevitable world short, and that's our man versus machine, like robot sentience Skynet sort of thing. If I need an epic scene, like to put the Ed 209 from RoboCop in it, I think is just astonishing. Like, I love that. And I think that that's a difference too. I don't know how it is versus other authors, but Sean and I have taken a lot of meetings in LA, pitching various ideas to companies, and directors, that sort of thing. And one of the things that we heard that I think just knocked me on my ass was, man, the thing that you guys have that other writers don't have is passion. And I was like, are you kidding me? They don't have passion. But at least in Hollywood, apparently that's a thing. Like, people are just looking for what is the newest, like, oh, you're into pandas right now, I'm going to write the best panda thing ever. Right. And so they're not passionate. They're like mercenaries. And so I don't know where I'm going on the like references thing. This is like so far and gone. But I guess I'm just trying to make a case for like what drives us is internal and passion and linking to the existing parts of our world. Oh, I was talking about like movies for inspiration. So I'll get that. But like, I mean, I mentioned this before. I hate looking at the real world. Like, the real world pisses me off now. I don't watch the news. Like, grudgingly, my wife will hand me the things that I need to know, or I'm going to get shot when I go outside, that sort of thing. But like, the world just disgusts me right now in some way. I mean, it's great in some ways, and it disgusts me in others. And so when the things that come out in the books are things that are coming out maybe like by osmosis, organically, like I'm absorbing a little bit of this or that. But what we do is get inspired by our own work, and I know how that sounds. So Sean mentioned that book. Is it called Future Proof? I actually don't know what the title is.
It is called Future Proof, yeah.
And it's a prequel, not a prequel, but it's this little standalone story in the world of the Beam, which you'll eventually get to read. And we wrote that as part of a marketing strategy. It doesn't change the fact that it's a really cool book, but it was. And once we wrote that book,
it's a Beam heist story.
Oh, I love it. Sold.
But that became, we needed I'm not going to give away anything here, but like that, we needed something for that story to revolve around. And once we had it, then that became the core thing in season 4. Not intentionally, but it's like this new piece of the world had been written, and I could have ignored it. That was the way it was designed, that I could ignore it. But no, that's not the way we work. And so each thing that we add to the world tends to become a compass for the next thing we write in that world.
But that makes what you were saying earlier make a lot more sense. You kept on saying it, but it makes sense that it's not that there's other external things coming on, or you're going through a process of this character or this theme or whatever. It's just that you guys happen to hyper focus on some need that evolves the world in some way. And now that becomes part of the world. And now you kind of recalculate the world based on this new thing. And now new stories emerge.
Oh, yeah, tell the Sterling Gibson error story.
Okay, I will tell that, and just to answer your question first,
yeah, please, yeah.
I think that for sure, season 4 would have been very different had it been written in 2015 versus now. But that's not because of things that we would have read, or in fact, I don't read very much anymore. I mean, I read constantly, but I don't have time to read for a lot of stuff outside of the 100+ stories that we produce a year. Like there's just a lot there, but I do watch a shit ton. So last year I watched 500 movies, TV seasons, or whatever. Like, so I'm constantly watching shit and absorbing. And then there's real life. So like there's a big event that happens in season 4 that was very much inspired by something that happened in Texas, at the end of last year. And so
I don't remember what it is.
Just think about it.
Sounds like a beam outage. Right. Yeah.
Yes. It was an outage. So it was an outage, and the way that all happened, and there were a few things actually with Dead City, which we've talked about a couple of times. We had every intention of finishing that up, and then COVID happened, so we had to reconcile the two. And Johnny at first was like, "I don't want to do this. This is
too close to the bone.
It's too close. This is the real world. I don't want to write about this shit, And to me, it was like cathartic. It was like, well, we could write about this, and it was just about finding the right framing, because real life does suck if it intrudes in the fiction too much. And the beam was more fun when it was distant future instead of the shit that we're dealing with. So no, we already had these things in motion, and I'm glad that we're seeing all of our work through, because I think that I don't know. I think that 5 years from now, I think we're just getting started.
And to tell that story that I I'll tell it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, because it was based on what you said about recalculating the world, which I think is important, and I've seen it done poorly before, where you get to a new season of a TV show and they'll do something,
and it's all retconning, which is different.
A
character that was supposedly there that clearly wasn't there, right?
Yeah,
right. Or the inverse. Poochie died on the way to his home planet. So So just to get this out of the way, we don't have plans. We have the bones of plans, but we never. So if you've noticed something in season 3 that you're like, oh, look at that shit that they planted in season 1, that's happening on the coincidence is happening when I write season 3. When I look back and say I can use that, it's not planned. Never is it planned, and so. That's because I think we're kind of like this. There's the Stephen King metaphor of finding a story rather than creating a story. And that's the way it feels to me, is we're excavating something that's already there. So we did, Sterling Gibson is the author of Plugged, which is what we mentioned before, the nonfiction book. He's our Malcolm Gladwell. And in Plugged, he's talking about a guy named Clive Spooner, who is a British industrialist. He's the guy who put the base on the moon. And he mentions something about Clive in the World Cup. I think he quotes him. I think he quotes Clive something. Well, that was the year I went to the World Cup, whatever. A reader emailed us after this was published and said, "You dumbasses, the World Cup is not held every year. Neither of us are soccer fans." We're that would have been an easy thing to research, but I don't know. I figured it was every year, like the Super Bowl. I didn't think about it.
I figured it was every year too. Never occurred to me.
Yeah, that's what I would think also. Yeah.
And he goes, the guy who emailed us and said, an Englishman who's a fan of soccer is not going to make that mistake. And so we had a choice. We could go and we could very, very easily. It wouldn't have hurt anything.
I mean, because really, other than you, Colin, no one had read Plugged.
Nobody would have noticed. Nobody would have noticed it. You could just take Plugged, fix the date, put it back. It didn't change anything.
Yep.
But what we did instead, and this is like kind of a microcosm of like how we work in general, is we said, well, no, hold on. That's out in the world. That's done. We can't pull that back. Like, I hate that. I hate that, like,
you don't
need
get
to
to
fix
change
something.
history.
It's
once
in.
it's in the world, it's done. You can't come back for it. And so we said, okay, well, so what can we do? And so what we decided was that Sterling Gibson's credibility would need to come into question in season 3 because he made that error. So when Sterling Gibson was a character in season 3,
because it's such an obvious error. No Englishman who loves soccer would
and they
make
say
that
the exact
mistake.
same things.
Clearly,
to us, they're like, an Englishman would not make that
making
mistake,
it up.
Sterling. And so we do that sort of thing all the time. And I think that when those things happen, I think you sense that they're real. I think the reader like senses that we're playing straight. We'll look something in the eye. We have another story where these people live underground, and it occurred to me mid-writing, like after I'd written half of the book, that like they're living underground. Like, how can they not know they're underground? Where does the air come from? How does the grass grow in their lawns because there's no sun? And so I just had a character wonder about it. Like, I don't have the answers either, but as long as it's clear that we don't know and we're admitting that we don't know,
readers don't want. It's the same for viewers. You know, people who are consuming story. It's the same principle as marketing. Really, people love to buy shit. They hate to be sold to.
Yep.
And storytelling is the same way. People want, like, we are professional liars. That is our job, to get on the page and tell you a lie that is so good that you believe it. You know, even if you know everything that we said is made up, because clearly it's not 2097. But if we do our job, then you believe it in the time that you spend with us.
And that goes to, like, I mean, Gabe, when you talk about kind of building these things that are like HBO level properties, it's like that's Game of Thrones. Like, the reason people love Game of Thrones is there's that sub level of obsession and backstory interconnectivity where they can finish this one series and there's so much accurate lore, they can go back and do 3 prequel series. And those are all legitimate ideas to put into production. It's the same with what you're building.
Yeah, I think that the Beam could have, the only thing limiting on the Beam actually is Johnny's bandwidth and wanting to, you know, how much he wants to play in this versus other stuff. But I think the world itself is really sustainable. And if we could create pockets where other writers could go in and expand, where Johnny doesn't have to be a part of it, but, you know, because the world is really, really big and pliable. And I feel like it could just keep on going.